Okay.
All right. Hello and welcome to our very first panel discussion of this WLEC conference, The Future of Female Entrepreneurship and Implications. We're really excited to have these four very dynamic panelists for this discussion based all over the world. So let's not waste any time and let me dive in and start our introductions. First, we have Karin Lohitnavy. She's based out of Bangkok, Thailand. However, she has been a nomad throughout Europe, living in many different countries. She's the founder of a globally recognized PR company called Midas Public Relations, and they've been awarded many awards throughout Southeast Asia. She's a master connector. She is also the leader of many networks, definitely in a global sense as well as a local sense here in Thailand. She's a communication specialist, also working with virtual events, a mentor. She's part of the PROI Worldwide Thailand, a PRCA member, and she helps individuals stand out. She also works closely with women to help mentor them into leadership positions and to be all that they can be. And I also know that Karin has the majority of her staff are female, and she definitely provides internships globally to individuals to help just really infuse a sense of ownership and leadership within them. So please welcome Karin Lohitnavy. Next, we have Johann Bachmann, and Johan is based in Gothenburg, Sweden. He is our brave man of the panel today, so we're very excited to hear his side. He's the owner of Lead and Grow in Sweden. He helps individuals release the full potential, not just in themselves, but through their organization. He believes in really high performance, human-natured cultures and agile cultures as well. He's a coach consultant with international leadership development under his belt, helping leaders realize their own human potential. Also a keynote speaker. Please welcome Johann Bachmann. Next, we have Jessica Sato, or Jess Sato. She is based out of Colorado, USA, and the founder of CEO of Jessica Sato Consulting, a business strategy and coaching firm that helps corporate women leave the 9-to-5 and build their professional service businesses. After 10 years stint as a leadership development expert, owning 3 other successful businesses and a life-changing assignment in Ethiopia, Jessica created a transformational business to empower and teach women-owned businesses how to engage audiences, create compelling offers, and use online marketing strategies to sell with confidence without fancy tech, overwhelm, or burnout. Please welcome Jess Sato. And last but not least, we have Sandy Lam. Sandy is based out of Colorado, USA as well. She is the CEO and executive coach at Altitude Business Coaching that specializes in coaching for women in male-dominated industries and speaks to audiences all over the country on learning how to lead with emotional intelligence to transform the way the teams collaborate, grow both personally and professionally. She also is a speaker coach for TEDx in Colorado Springs, Breckenridge, and Franklin, Tennessee. Sandy is also very involved with the Tomorrow People org on many committees, as well as our coveted advisory board. Please welcome Sandy Lam. Excellent. So we're going to dive right in. For those of you who don't know how this panel discussion works, these panelists will be asked a series of questions. It is 90 minutes long. They'll have about 3 minutes per question to answer. So if you hear them stop suddenly, that's because we are moving on to the next question. We definitely want to give everybody equal time and the ability to share their own expertise as well as their own, from their heart and from their experience. So we're very excited to have this. Please make sure that you connect with them, not just through Facebook or LinkedIn, and they'll put their handles in the chat, but also on the Whova app for those of you that are part of the WLEC conference and have access to our coveted Whova app that we love hosting our platform or our conferences on. It sounds like I'm a little bit tongue-tied today. So let's dive into the questions. And I'm going to ask this first question actually to all of you. And we were having a little bit of side chat before we started. So Johan, I'm going to ask you this question first, and I'm going to go to the ladies. Johan, how do you feel that female entrepreneurship differs from male entrepreneurship and leadership? We're going to combine the two. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. That's a very, very interesting topic, I think. But I think for me, I think the whole discussion about the difference between people, we are people, no matter what, where we live, and if we are, what sex we have or whatever. Globally, leadership is human leadership for me.
All right. How about you? Let's go to you, Sandy.
Thanks for the question, Lynn. Yeah, I would agree with what Johan said. I think that entrepreneurship it takes a certain courage and bravery, I think, to take that leap. And I don't think that it's any different when it comes to men or women. I think that we all, those of us that are entrepreneurs, have a passion for the work that we do. And I think that, that crosses gender. I would absolutely agree that we all have a human hat first before we have a male or female hat. And really that is sort of our North Star. So I would say we connect first on a human level. And, that's really what brings us together. When it comes to entrepreneurship, I think the more that we can come together to support one another, the better. So I'm looking to connect us, despite our differences rather than divide us.
Excellent. Sandy, thank you for that. Karin, how about you?
Well, I wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was 3. So started very early on for me. I'd say from what I noticed, women tend to be more like solopreneurs. They tend to have smaller companies than men, maybe because we women tend to be a bit more modest. And maybe it's also because we have this fear of going big. So this is what I've noticed. Women tend to be very, very specialized at what they do. And they go out on their own first. And, with a bit of luck, they get to be bigger. So that's been my kind of way of classifying the differences between men and women. Although I agree with Johan and Sandy, first of all, we are human beings.
Excellent, Karin. And you brought up a couple of good points that I'm going to come back to. I'm going to come to you, Jess.
Yeah, so this is, I've thought about this question a lot because there is definitely a trend of wanting to highlight female entrepreneurship, right? You see that hashtags everywhere. I mean, I use them sometimes. And like everyone else, I don't know that there's actually a difference between men and women from an entrepreneurship perspective, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that, the way we approach things and some of the challenges that are associated with entrepreneurship show up differently for men and women. So like Karin said, I think a lot of times women do tend to have smaller companies. I mean, there's a handful of women that are, breaking the 7-figure barrier. I think at the last I heard it was around 4%. And I think that maybe speaks to some of the social and cultural constructs that are out there that do keep us to a certain degree playing small, whether that's not using our voice in the way that we want to. Maybe it's lack of access to venture capital funding and things like that. So I agree with everyone in that we are human first. entrepreneurship is not gender-based. And at the same time, the way we approach things, the way we serve our communities, and the challenges that we face, I do think there are some unique differences between men and women in that regard.
Excellent. Way to line me right up, Jess. So I'm going to go back into the challenges. And I definitely want to go back to the three ladies on the panel. And what challenges do you, either you've personally experienced as a female entrepreneur or that you've personally seen? Now, we've heard fear of going big. We've heard, the glass ceiling. We've heard lack of access to maybe funding or different things of that nature. But what are some other challenges that you feel women entrepreneurs today face, and maybe even a way that they can get around them? I'm gonna go with you, Karin.
That's a very big question. I think whether women or men, we all face the challenges that we put to ourselves. Basically, we are our greatest hurdle. So if we go into a business and we think that our biggest challenge is going to be the funding, then it's going to be that. If we think that it's going to be lack of authority, it's going to be that. If it's going to be not business savvy enough, then it's going to be this. So this is why I think it's very, very important to trust in yourself, to go out, meet the right people, have a business coach, somebody who keeps you on track. And especially women need that kind of support group, which is why I think it's very important that women should network as well. So I know, I've done some research on this, that women tend to not be available in the mornings to network, and which is why many BNI groups are so, Business Network International are so male driven, because they are taking their kids to school, etc., etc. And there are other networks. So we created, for example, the Lionesses of Siam in Bangkok, and we meet in lunchtime where women are more available to meet. And yes, I think apart from that, you need to surround yourself with the right people, and then the hurdles will go away.
I love that. Mindset's a huge thing. And Johan, I'm going to come to you about mindset after I ask the ladies about this. But I think mindset, network, and creating your own opportunities are three definitely strong ways to overcome those hurdles. How about you, Jess? Come back to you, and then Sandy, I'm going to come to you.
I have to echo what Karin's saying. I mean, when I think about my own journey, some of it has been mindset, and some of it has been legitimate challenges with blending life and work together. So, Karin talking about the challenges of mourning. I mean, even this session today, right? My daughter has to go to school. My husband's not available. So, those kinds of things I think tend to fall on the women's shoulders, which does create some natural guardrails or boundaries in your day that I don't feel like men experience as much. I also think, lack of mentorship, or I don't even want to say representation because that feels a little bit too strong, but because there are not a lot of women who are breaking the six-figure barrier, who are breaking the seven-figure marks in their business, it's sometimes hard to even visualize what you're trying to accomplish. And so I find that for a lot of women, we're setting our boundaries or our goals, we're setting our goals too low and creating these artificial barriers that are sort of rooted in mindset. And so I think when you surround yourself with women, high achieving women, either who are entrepreneurs, women who are leaders in their organizations, it gives you a clear picture or clearer picture of what you're striving for. And I don't mean that from a comparison perspective, but when you can see people who have done it, who look like you, who have similar, situations to you, it makes it easier to think, oh, I can actually get there. And so having those really strong networks and people who are much further ahead of you is really important. So you need that community of support that's sort of in it with you and people who are further ahead. And so mentorship, coaches, and other people, I think that's a really powerful way to move yourself forward and not allow some of those sort of self-imposed barriers or cultural barriers get in the way.
Excellent. Thanks, Jess. Lots of great nuggets there. How about you, Sandy?
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said, and I absolutely believe in strong networks and all of that, but I'm going to put it back on the individual, because when I first started my business and I was doing business coaching, smaller businesses versus executive coaching, which I've transitioned to, one of the first things I would talk with a client about is, if you don't believe what you're saying, if you don't believe in your mission and your vision and your passion, and you can't demonstrate that you believe it, how do you expect anybody else to believe it or to buy in or whatever? So I really think it comes back to self-belief is the foundation for being a successful entrepreneur, is the foundation for being brave enough to take that leap. And also, we get a little bit caught up in identity crisis too mode. Me personally, when I left corporate America, I was a program manager, project manager. One of the very first blog posts I wrote about was, who am I? Who am I now that I'm no longer a project manager, or I'm no longer a program manager? How do I identify myself? The simple answer is we're not our titles, right? We're not defined by our titles. We're defined by our acts and our works and what we go out in the world and do. So I think that it really comes down for me to self-belief. And I always tell people my husband pushed me off the cliff. So I say that my self-belief probably wasn't really strong to begin with. He had to give me that extra push. But then once I took the leap. So then let's talk about once you take the leap, right? So 3 feet from gold, if you've ever heard that analogy. I feel like oftentimes we set goals, and I agree with Jess, sometimes we set the bar low because we're afraid to set it any higher and not achieve. So when we do set the bar low, even, we need to be celebrating those small wins and successes along the way to keep us motivated and keep us building that resilience to move forward. But oftentimes we hit that mark where we're just so close, to making that big sale or making, getting that one more client. And we have this tendency to give up. So, and that's where I say it comes back to your self-belief, right? If you have a strong belief in yourself and you know that I can do this, I believe in what I'm doing so strongly that I'm just going to keep going, then you'll get there. But that's often a concern, right? It's like you get to that point where you give up, and then oftentimes you're just this close, right? 3 feet from finding that gold. So.
Yeah, I love those points. I'm going to come back to building resilience here in a second, but I want to go to Johan. Johan, I know you work a lot with mindset and vision and mission and purpose driven. I really want to come with a question of, how, regardless female or male, but we're speaking about female entrepreneurship and
Go ahead.
Implication. And I know you're married to a female entrepreneur, as well as you coach and consult, not just in the corporate world, but also entrepreneurs that are female as well. So what would you say are, first of all, some ways to help? How important, let me reword this. How important is it to be vision, mission, and purpose driven to drive an entrepreneur? And how does mindset play a role, as well as maybe a couple of tricks that you use or tips that you use to help individuals navigate that?
Wow, how long time do we have? I totally agree what you're saying, and especially you were jumping the cliff there, pushing it, Sandy. I think who you are and what's important for you to actually to be consistent in what you're doing, having the perseverance of actually pushing through when it's tough. That's key. When I work with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, it's key of what kind of balance they have, and when you talk about persevere, it is a tough job, and I think the mindset really as an entrepreneur is to think first. Do you want to be a lifetime entrepreneur that is living and doing whatever you do and pay your and get income to pay your bills, or are you there for actually earning money to do an exit in a few years' time? That's totally different behaviors, because if you do an exit, you might have my extraordinary life, which I want to achieve, when you have a better foundation for actually taking the next step. But you don't know what that is. So it's two different mindsets. Is it a lifetime entrepreneur, or do I actually work to create a larger business that I can sell or be bought up or whatever? But to have that mindset, I work a lot with people that are lifetime, they haven't thought it through, and it becomes just a lifetime entrepreneurship. And usually they become so stressed because they want to be everywhere. They want to do everything. They want to achieve so much in different fields. One of those people, I've tried it, didn't like it, do something else. And that's really push through what's important in order to achieve what you want to achieve as an entrepreneur, and have that go from the end in mind and say, what do I want to achieve in order, and what do I need to actually do to go there? That could be like 3-4 years working very hard, but you know that you're actually going to achieve something. You work towards something, and then you have a well-being at the same time.
I love that. And I love that you differentiate. I know we've had many discussions about this, but the mindset of, are you looking to eventually really grow a true business that you can sell or leave down to someone, a family member or a worker? Or are you creating a rat race for yourself where you're constantly in that hamster wheel? And I love that you help individuals see it from both sides of the coin. I want to jump into, a few of you mentioned perseverance and resilience, tongue twisters today. And, we're not going to go too much into this, but definitely a question that I got asked a lot, because I work with entrepreneurs across the globe, is, how did the pandemic change the way individuals did business? And I think that this correlates with the perseverance and the resilience fiber, which I definitely want to dig a little bit more into. But first, I want to throw out that question. How did you see women entrepreneurs really handle their business in the pandemic? Did you see any new innovative ways? And if so, what was that? And Jess, I'm going to come to you first.
I love this question because I think women are naturally very adaptable. And it makes me think a lot of this term that was coined, the pandemic makes me think a lot of a term that was coined by the US military in the 90s called VUCA. And it represents volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I feel like the last 2.5 years in now, that's what we have been dealing with, an environment that is complicated. There's no clear answers. We're constantly having to adapt. And most of the women that I worked with, I feel like were able to adapt. There was that natural stress and concern and, questioning in the beginning of, okay, how am I going to shift my model? But when they took a step back, that's where I really felt like people thrived and were able to move into their natural problem-solving ability. I mean, I think about, a handful of clients who really were able to shift completely and revamp an entire in-person model to something that was completely online. And now we're moving back into a hybrid space. So I think it to me, any business that is surviving and thriving right now that started pre-pandemic is a testament, right, of being able to adapt. I mean, that phrase, adapt or die, right? To me, that's exactly what happened. Seeing women learn, shift, grow, and change, those are the ones that really survived. So I don't know that there's any one thing that people did. I think it was super individualized, but for those businesses that were already online, like I'll use myself as an example, my business was 100% online. And even I had to do some adapting in terms of the way I talked to people, the way I showed up. My marketing strategy shifted from being in front of people in a live audience to being online, right? If you have a mindset, kind of goes back to what Johan was saying, if you have a mindset of possibility and a willingness to adapt and grow, that's where I think we thrive. I don't know that that's unique to women entrepreneurship, but I definitely think there's some resilience that's rooted in, I don't know if it's motherhood or what, but I think it set us up for success in that regard.
Thanks, Jess. How about you, Sandy?
Yeah, so it's can you just repeat the question for me, Lynn?
Sure.
Talking about resilience, right?
Well, resilience and perseverance. I don't know why that word's not flowing off my tongue today. And how do you feel that women handled the pandemic with their businesses? So essentially those two things were two values were points that women and men showed, but what else do you feel that maybe how they handled their business during the pandemic, if there were any innovative ways that women might have stood out?
Yeah, so I think I've done a couple of talks on emotional intelligence and resilience, and I think about resilience in terms of a muscle. And the more we use that muscle, the more we flex it, the more we build it and develop it, right? And one of the things that really forms the foundation for resilience is the idea that we're getting through to the other side, right? So it's, well, how do you take that first step? And one of the things that I talk about is this idea of connection and how important it is. And as women, and probably there's men out there too, I'm sure, but we have a hard time asking for help. Okay. And connection is one of those muscles that the more that we can, and not connection from the traditional perspective of how you think of connection, but more along the lines of reaching out and asking for help and asking for support. So I think that we found more women doing that in the pandemic than ever before, probably by virtue of, they felt like they had to. But then when they made those connections and when they got through to the other side, then that helps you to build the confidence and the other things that will help to build that resilience. The other thing I wanted to just mention is we're talking about it from the perspective of entrepreneurs. Well, all of my clients are in corporate America, right? So how have they dealt with the pandemic, and how has the pandemic affected them? And what I would tell you is a couple things. Number one, you start to question how you spend your time, right? All of us, as we've gone through this, start to question, like, do I really want to spend this much time doing this particular thing? And we sort of shift our priorities, I think. So you're seeing a lot of that. You're also seeing people that have come to this place where now it's like, I don't want to work for anybody else. I've decided I can do this. I'm working from home already. I'm being, working remote, all of that. And I want to just go do something on my own. So I think we'll probably talk about it, but that's really, I think, what has led to the shift towards more entrepreneurship. And then also, this idea of, the great resignation, like Jess said, this is real. Like, people are deciding, like, how do I want to spend my time? But the last thing that I'll say, and I'll give an example from my business, is I think when we first came into this, you found people being innovative and going to this virtual, and everybody at this point is tired of virtual. I get that. but that doesn't mean, virtual doesn't necessarily mean we can't connect. And so I want to dismiss that, dispel that rumor, right? Because we're virtual doesn't mean that we can't connect with people. You know, I did a virtual presentation. They sent me the statistics the other day. There was over 7,000 views on my presentation globally. So you can reach people virtually.
I love you for that. Being a fellow person I was on Zoom way before it became cool. And I definitely agree with that. So I appreciate that. Johan and Karin, I'm going to turn it a little bit, but same question. Johan, I'm coming to you first. You work in the corporate world with culture and leadership, as well as with entrepreneurs globally. What would you say, did you see any differences between the corporate and the entrepreneurs and how they handled the pandemic? And what were some of those ways that stood out of how they navigated the pandemic?
Wow. I'm sitting first. Could I just answer short first when it came to women, how they handle?
Yes. Please.
My realization of what I've seen in the Nordic countries is really, I've seen a lot of women entrepreneurs taking the lead in you were talking about adaptability there, Jess. I've seen they were shifting so fast when it came to the pandemic and being online, being coaches, being creating learning society communities and everything like that. And I would really like to what I saw as well and see still is that women have if we look at the gender, people, guys are brought up to be cool and tough people and have a cool image about themselves. Women are more raised up to be more in behind and fit in more, and that has it's also created a connection. Women are more of actually embracing good relationships, and I think that is key when it comes to the recession. Is women had better close relationships with other women than men had. I will a little bit argue against you, Sandy, in that, because I think that we men, we have a tendency not to ask for help. We want to be the strong ones. But here I saw something different. I saw the women are actually helping each other in this, and not only when it comes to being an entrepreneur, but helping themselves to cope with the situation, which gave them energy.
Excellent.
That's what I saw. It could be something somewhere else. I don't know. When it comes to the corporate world, well, I'm afraid to say that we are more male in the management teams, and they were still fighting. Of course, everybody was fighting to not lose money in the beginning. But what I saw is what is appreciated in corporate culture is really that the employees want what we call more women skills, taking care of the employees, more open communication, transparency, vulnerability, etc. coming out there.
I love that. And I know this is probably ringing in Sandy's ears since she's an emotional intelligence queen as well. I love emotional intelligence. And there is it was a few articles put out about how men are so much more emotionally intelligent in some aspects, or that women are in some aspects, and really where women's strength is or lies is in that relationship building side, in that connection, in making people feel welcome, and it doesn't dismiss the other parts of it. So I love that you mentioned that. Karin, I'm going to come to you because your clientele base is quite hefty. I don't want to name drop, but you definitely work with some very well-known big name people, corporations across the world. And I know that it is a lot of it's male driven, but I definitely want for you to reflect on the female aspects of, you know, not just the entrepreneurs that you work with, but also in the corporate side, even if they're not the main connection that you work with. How did the women that you typically work with, either corporate or on the entrepreneur side, really navigate the pandemic? And did you see any big innovations or movements that really stood out to you?
First of all, I want to agree with what everyone before me said. I think resilience is one of the key aspects, you know, that make women entrepreneurs very strong. Adaptability as well. And I think moving on to what Johan was saying, communication. I think communication was a key factor during the pandemic, explaining to people perhaps salary reductions that happened with some of our clients, explaining how to be careful, you know, having new regulations, talking to one another at team meetings, keeping the morale in the company. This is very important. And I think women generally did this better than men. And this is where women's more nurturing capabilities kicked in. And I would say also during this time, helping others. These were also efforts very often driven by women, you know, doing some sort of CSR activities, helping people, getting food, supplies that they needed, and basically driving the activities and making people participate. So this is what I have noticed, not to say that some men are not generous. Many men are very generous, of course, but I would say that the women were looking at the pandemic as not only surviving in terms of surviving with their business, but helping the others survive as well, and keep everyone happy as much as possible in these uncertain times.
I love that. And I'm going to go off of something that you said, and I definitely saw it as well, that really more heavily than on the male side in my arena, I saw women uplifting the communities. And I think that this is a discussion that we've had many times about you know, women having more financial sovereignty, women being entrepreneurs, women making decisions about themselves and having that self-sufficiency and drive, how it can change the dynamic of the community around them. So I want to throw that question out to all of you, actually. What do you feel the impact could be for communities if more women embraced the entrepreneur hat, as well as a community leader? Johan, I'm going to come to you first, and I'm actually going to ask all of you this question.
The only thing that comes to mind when you ask that is not much, really. It's but I think what I've seen is more of actually a better leadership once you take off and go from being yourself employed to start bringing on people on board to your company. What I think is it's a better leadership when a woman is the CEO, actually, because they care more about the humans they employ rather than the of course the performance, but not only focusing on that. Women have a more generalized idea of actually taking care of everybody that they employ.
Which in turn can do what for our communities, do you feel?
For communities, I think because I that's what I work with, corporate culture, and what I see is really when you feel happy, you want to go to work, and you have a well-being at work, and you perform well, and you get more proud of being accountable of what you're doing in your company, the wellness is increasing, but also that is opening up your mind and want to contribute more in the society as well.
Okay, excellent.
And
Thank
I think
you.
more focus is really in that kind of in women-led companies, that the focus on more of actually contributing as well. Don't know why, but it's what I've seen.
Excellent. Thank you, Johan. How about you, Karin? How are the increase in women entrepreneurship and women stepping in as leaders affecting our communities, or could affect our communities?
I don't know about you, Lynn, but I'm always looking for the woman I can talk to in a company. I always feel that things get done when you're talking to other women. So I tend to think businesses are going to be more efficient. I think women take themselves less seriously and others more so. So I really believe that when a woman says she's going to do something, she gets it done. She's she's more passionate. I think women bring a lot of passion to their work. Yeah, I really think businesses could be better. Not to say that we don't need men, because obviously there's some businesses that still would need the qualifications that men bring to the table. However, women give other people a bigger voice. So there's more independence, there's more letting people shine, and giving people the opportunity to prove themselves, which I think is very important in today's world where purpose plays such a big role. So being able to work in your light, and being able to speak out, to communicate to others, and not be the one listening. So I think this could be one of the key things that women bring to the table when they're in business.
Thank you. How about you, Sandy?
Yeah, so I worked the last couple of years with an organization here in Colorado that is a not-for-profit that works for sustainability of women and their families in Colorado. And their tagline is "Women Thriving, Colorado Rising." And I really believe that the more that we support women in terms of achieving economic opportunities for women, the more that it supports the overall family unit. And the other thing that I think about is, and those of you that have heard me speak at this conference before know that I've talked about how women in corporate, we talk about collaboration, we talk about supporting other women and empowering other women. And the reality is there's not very many positions for women at the top in corporate. And so it leads to a culture of competition, not a culture of collaboration. So what better way to get rid of competition than to just go into business for yourself and become the leader, right? So I can't compete with anybody if I'm the CEO of my own organization. So I think that that's just, the more that we uplift women, and then doing it, right? We talked about leading by example, the idea of leading by example. The more we do it, the more we hopefully propel the self-belief in others that they can do it as well.
I love that. And Jess, how about you?
My thoughts are a little bit scattered on this question. I mean, I've just jotted down a bunch of random ideas that have popped up as people have been talking. And, one of the things that's coming up for me is that a lot of the women that I know who are entrepreneurs did not really start their businesses because they wanted to make a lot of money. And it's not that they don't want to make money, for better or worse, but if you really ask them, it comes back to having an impact in the world. And when I say the world, it could be your local community, it could be, the state, like Sandy's talking about, could be globally. And so when I think about the role of women as entrepreneurs in their community, it feels like it's a very natural connection with creating an impact that makes a difference. And I tend to see those things being around the things that impact families, that impact education. And like Sandy said, I think, you know, when you give women economic freedom and opportunity, and I don't want to say give, I actually don't even like that. When women have economic freedom and equality, as they should, that's where you start to see the impact in local communities. You see the growth, you see access to education, you see access to proper health care. You know, one of the organizations that I support is all about menstrual equality and making sure that women, young girls have education and access to the things that would otherwise create a barrier. And we don't really think about those kinds of things, but when you have women who are driving the charge, they are thinking about those things because they know what the barriers look like. They know what they feel like. And so, you know, there's something about women entrepreneurs that I do think is a little bit different. And that is that they're very focused on impact. In fact, I've seen many posts, articles, you know, podcasts talking a lot about it being less about the money and more about the impact. And, you know, I think there's a balance, right? You can't be an entrepreneur and run a business without making money. And there's something really powerful that when the work that you're doing is beyond that and has real impact in the lives of people that you connect with, that's where I think women really thrive.
Absolutely. And what I would add to that is, you know, making sure that we are asking for our worth too, and making sure that we're seeing our worth, which was a whole dialogue that I just had the other day on another panel discussion. So maybe we'll get into that in a second. I saw some activity going on in the chat, and I wanted to tap into that. And again, this question is going to go to all four of you. If you had to suggest to, and this is the Women's Leadership and Empowerment Conference, so we're going to go with women's leadership or women entrepreneurs coming up, or even those that are seasoned, what would be the top 2 to 3 skills that you would suggest for them to learn or to work on in order to become better in their craft as a leader, as an entrepreneur? So I'm going to go to Sandy first. So 2 or 3 skills that individuals can work on to be a better entrepreneur or a stronger entrepreneur and a stronger leader.
How did I know you were going to ask me first? As I'm taking my notes. The first thing that came into my mind. So in my career, I mentioned that I was in project management, program management. And when I think about what it took for me to go to take that leap to entrepreneurship, the first thing that pops to mind is don't wait until you're ready. But I have a caveat with that, and that is plan accordingly. So I would say strategic planning is a really, really important skill that, you know, sometimes as women, even as male entrepreneurs, we have a passion for the work that we do. We have a passion for the products that we sell, but we don't have a clue as to how to run a business. So I think that strategic planning and getting a solid foundation in business and understanding what it takes to run a business and plan accordingly. So all of that behind, like, what's my vision and mission, right? Just talked about having an impact. What's my impact going to be? Who am I going to impact? Who's my target client going to be? Because when we try to serve everyone, we serve no one. And oftentimes, as entrepreneurs, we want to just have this abundance mindset. Oh, I just want to help everybody. And in reality, that doesn't work, right? I heard once the riches are in the niches. So I think that the more that you can really focus your product, your service, and the people that you're going to serve is huge in terms of making that leap. And so I would say strategic planning. I'm gonna say I'm going to say one thing that I don't think you need because I feel as strongly about this as I do about the other. And that is website development. Okay. You don't have to have a website before you go launch a business. So I don't know how many people I talk to that are like, well, I need business cards and I need a website and I need this and I need that. I don't. If you don't know who you're going to serve, what are you going to put on your website? So website is not the first thing that you need to do, people. So figure out the strategy, figure out who you're going to serve. What's your mission and vision and impact going to be? I'm done. I'm off my soapbox.
I love that. You're speaking my love languages here. And what I would say too is when they are ready, website development is still a skill set that they don't have to learn if that's not their expertise. Hire somebody.
Delegation. Maybe that's the other skill you need.
Absolutely. And there are plenty of price points and services like Upwork and Fiverr and different agencies like that give newly budding entrepreneurs who are on more of a shoestring budget the ability, or those that like to just be budget conscious, that can give you the ability to still create that when you're ready. So I love that. Jess, I saw you shaking your head a lot. I'm going to come to you next.
I felt like I was in Sandy's brain a little bit, or she was in mine. I don't know. I mean, I definitely agree. Strategic planning, and with that comes execution and follow through. I think we are really good at having a lot of ideas. I mean, that is entrepreneurship by nature is very visionary. We have a lot of ideas, and at the same time, that comes at a cost because sometimes we lack the follow through. So being very clear on all the things Sandy said, and then having that execution strategy, I think is super important. The other piece that, when you were asking the question, Lynn, I don't think we need help with our craft, right? I mean, most of us are practitioners by nature. I mean, that is the shift of moving into entrepreneurship, is moving out of being the doer and being in some regards the leader, depending on what your company looks like. And so we don't need more help on the actual work, but we do need to understand how to run a business. And so the other essential skill that I would say is business and financial acumen. I think for women in particular, this is hands down one of the weakest spots for us. We shy away from numbers. We don't want to look at the data, right? Even if we have the data, which most of us do, we don't know what to do with it. So really taking the time to either bring people into your business who understand the numbers and who can help you make sense of that, or doing a little bit of learning around, what is a balance sheet? What is a profit and loss statement? Why do they matter? What do those pieces of information tell you so that you can make strategic decisions? I mean, I've worked with people who have never looked at their numbers. And I think to myself, how do you make decisions about what you're going to invest in, how you're going to bring in support, how close or far you are from your goals? So that to me is a huge gap in skills that I think really, we have to bring that into our business toolbox. And then the other piece I would say is delegation. I find it incredibly difficult. And this is just in all transparency. I do not like delegating. I never have. I didn't like it in corporate. I don't like it in my own business. I am, I like being a doer. I like knowing that what happens is the result of my effort. And at the same time, we can't do it alone. And there comes a point in every business, if it's growing, if it's, getting where you want it to be, that you literally have to bring people in to help. And so delegation, business strategy and execution, and then business and financial acumen to me are the skill set that people need in addition to their area of expertise.
I love those. The one caveat that I would say is, and this is something that somebody told me when I was first getting into entrepreneurship, is because I definitely shy away from numbers too. Like that was my thing, and still something that I constantly work on. However, what I was told is, regardless if I have the finances to bring somebody in to handle my numbers, that is still a part of your business that you do not want to give up all of your all of your rights to, or all of your, give to somebody in its entirety. And what I have found in my own personal journey working with entrepreneurs across the globe is women tend to be more willing to do that and trusting in the person that they're hiring, which gets them into a bind at times. So making sure that you have that education and that knowledge, and at least that pulse on what's going on, and staying on top of it and engaged. So thank you for that, Jess. Karin, I'm going to come to you. What do you feel are some skill sets, 2 to 3 skill sets that women entrepreneurs can learn?
I think most have already been said. I'm going to add communication. I think being able to communicate well, and not just being able to communicate verbally, but also in written, because when you have a business, you often need to write about it, blog about it, post about it on social media. And being able to be a good communicator means you can communicate with your clients, with your staff, with colleagues, etc. So communication. And then I would say having a good support system. So the support system can be the financial, can be a virtual assistant, can be a great IT team that you can rely on, a design team, etc. So having this support system. And in the support system, I would also add somebody who can keep you on track. So perhaps a coach, or a group of people that you're networking with, and that can give you a push when you're feeling down. And lastly, I would say a lot of optimism, because when you start out on the entrepreneurship journey, you need to have that unfailing optimism. I wouldn't be here if I had listened to all the negative vibes around me. So you need to blank them out, believe in yourself, and keep that optimism.
I love that. Yeah, excellent. How about you, Johan?
Well, I think almost has been said. What I was thinking about is really depending on where you are in the phase of entrepreneurship, of course. But for you to be sustainable as an entrepreneur, you need to actually look into yourself and see what are your expertise and what do you like. I mean, ikigai, you heard about this, that you what can you do business on, what are you good at, and what do you love to do, about among other things. But really, what do you thrive at? What do you love to do? And stick with that and prioritize that. Delegate everything else as much as you can. When you do that, and the reason why you do things, you can also you have high energy in what you're doing. You can easily, informally communicate, formally communicate to other people or what you want to achieve, and get help from other people, because they feel your energy and they want to help you if you are really genuine of what you're doing and why you're doing stuff. And also look into your support system, or you said support system, but I would say look into your contact and see who can complement you in what you do, both to look for business, but also to help you out.
I love that. And 2 things that I wrote down is really honing in your clarity skill set and your discernment. So gaining that clarity and then having discernment on that before you delegate, etc.
Yeah.
So speaking of support systems and people, I want to talk a little bit about this. Like, how do we develop the right team around us to be able to uplift us? So what are some things that we can do to develop the right team around us, either an employee side or a network side, or even just a collaborative, group of others that can help build each other? So what are some things that we can do, or maybe the areas that we need to look at in order to build the right team around us? And I'm going to come right back to you, Johan, since you started about that. I'm going to ask all of you this question.
It's a good question. I would really look into what's important for me. I mean, in my life, I talk about values. I work with values, and for me, it's really important to see who am I, what kind of person am I, and what's important for me in the phase I'm in. We were talking about having children at school or whatever. I need to find that balance and prioritize that as well. In that support system, you don't need only business associates or people that can help you, but also the support system in the private life that can help you out. So you need, and you also need, let's call it different networks at home, privately, taking care of your children, and of your husband as well, I was always saying, but not that. But having fun with in leisure time. Who do you spend time with that you can talk to and have fun with outside work? And also going into your business and say, how can we help each other out? And that is really go through your contact list. You have loads probably, and get down into your so-called power team or whatever team you want to call it in your different networks. And you can do that kind of structurally to look through it. And then you need to communicate your ambitions so they want to help you out again.
I love that. And I love how you touched on not just having one core network or support system around you, having the different support systems based on the aspect of life, business, or whatnot. And also giving back to them and building it based on a core values, like core values. So I love that, Johan. Yeah. How about you, Karin? And I love this question for you because I know what you've done. You have been a founder in many networks and women organizations. You've helped guide other networks, so not just in business, but in personal as well. And then also the nature of your what you do in the PR world is you help connect different networks of people to help support either your teams or your businesses. So I'd love to know what are some key ways to build the right network or support system around you?
First of all, I had understood your question on how you attract the right talent and the right people in your teams. So I'm not sure if that was part of the question, but if it is, I think communication plays once again a big role in terms of communicating your purpose, your values, your mission and vision. And by doing this, it's going to attract the right people to knock on your door to work with you. And generally, not all the time, but generally, I think we attract these people who like working in an international environment in Bangkok, which is pretty rare for a local PR company. And so the other way where you can really work on your support system is in mentoring your teams, in assigning a buddy to each new person that comes in the team, trying to look at what are their key talents and make them work on this talent, but at the same time also teach them to work better at the places where they're the weakest at. So this would be for the company, and definitely in terms of creating other support systems. When I first arrived in Bangkok, there weren't as many female networks as there are now, and my vision was always to create this woman support group where women would, even if they were competitors, share and work with one another and help push each other up. And I think we've reached this kind of support system with the Lionesses of Siam. On the other hand, I've created other business networks like the Bangkok Yuppies and Networking for Success. Inspire Bangkok is a network I attend on Friday mornings. So all these networks allow you to speak with like-minded individuals, have benchmarks, have the ability to compare and know if you need and reach out for help much more easily than if you were in your own little corner, and also allow you to know who's the best at each person, at each particular skill, and connect people. And I wanted to say the other thing that really brought our company to a next level was to take part in other PR networks, because going to the best PR networks, compare yourself to the best companies, not just in Bangkok, but everywhere in the world. And this can be for any sort of profession. It can be for doctors, for lawyers, for anything at all. But you go into a network, a business network with your peers, and that will push you. And I can really say that by joining PROI Worldwide, I opened up new opportunities, not just for myself, but also for the team. And recently, 3 years ago, we joined PRCA, and now I am the chair of PRCA for the new PRCA Thailand. And having these networks also help your own team members and other people in your industry get better. And I think that's the way forward.
I love that. There's a saying, something about the tide rising ships, the high tide rises all ships, or something like that. If somebody knows it, please put it into the chat. but I love that. It's that you are definitely stepping forward as the leader in your community, in your networks, in your own business. A rising tide lifts all ships. Thank you, Jess. And you're definitely showing the way. Jess and Sandy, I'm going to bring that question to you, and maybe just change it up just a slight little bit. As entrepreneurs, and I know that you've come from the corporate world, what are some ways that individuals, women entrepreneurs right now, what would you say to them, giving them tips on how to build their own support network outside of maybe what they have right now? Because a lot of times what I see, and I don't know if you've seen this, is we tend to play in the same pool for all, right? We go to the same five to seven people for our support, for our complacency, for our experience, for motivation, etc. So what would be some tips to other women entrepreneurs of how to build the right support networks for them? Sandy, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, so thanks for the question, and thanks for changing it up, because I was really confused going, how am I going to answer building a team when I'm the only person on my team? One of the things that I'm going to go back to something Johan said early, because I think it's really important. Sometimes as women, we have a hard time saying no, and we have this mindset when we first start out that, again, we have to serve everyone. And so I think we need to truly be rooted in our values and our beliefs. And that is something that was core to me launching my business, that as soon as I could figure out what my values and beliefs are and write them down and truly live authentically by them, it made it easy for me to decide who do I partner with, who do I take on as clients, all of that. So my two biggest strategies, I would say, are what I call strategic partnerships is one, and the other one. So I don't network. I don't go and network. I did at the beginning when I was doing business, and it just didn't feel business coaching. It just didn't feel right to me. then I thought, okay, when I figure out who my target client is, where are these people spending time? What room are they showing up in? So I went to go speak at conferences like Women in Nuclear. I used to work in nuclear power, Women in Energy, Project Management Institute, because I used to be a member of PMI. So I wasn't necessarily creating the networks or even going to the local ones here. I was reaching out globally to the ones that already existed and getting on a stage so that I could speak to the people in that room because they were my client. And then also back to the strategic partnership thing, I used to do early on what I called discovery calls. They were not sales calls. Let me say, they were not sales calls. I just wanted to talk to women and people that were in my network and say, okay, I know we worked together in years past. What are you currently experiencing today? You know, what are some constraints that you're bumping up against? What have you done? And it's a way of really in 15, 30 minutes, just learning so much about how it is that you can serve. And really, I know Jess does something similar. In fact, I think she's writing a book on it, but this idea of partnership and really discovery calls, and then again, speaking on stages where your target clients are in the room, I'd say are probably the biggest things that I've learned.
Thanks, Andy. How about you, Jess?
Well, when I think about, how do you, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, here, but what I'm hearing you ask is, how do we build a support network around us in order to, grow our business? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, grow ourselves, grow our business, grow as leaders.
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge something that you said earlier, which I think is really on point, that especially for people who are moving from corporate or professional careers into entrepreneurship, by definition, your network, the people around you, shifts. And I think that's a really hard lesson for people, because we think, oh, okay, I'm just moving into this new phase, but everything's going to stay the same. And it actually doesn't. And I've found that in many cases, the people that you think will support you the most are actually the people who support you the least. It's super frustrating and in some ways a little bit disheartening. And so one of the things I really encourage the women that I work with is to build a personal board of directors, right? Big companies have boards of directors, and they have those for a reason. And just because you're a solopreneur or even a tiny small business, maybe that has a handful of employees, you still need a board of directors. And so the way I like to think about that is framing it from the perspective of, who is the contrarian in your life? And these are people that you trust implicitly, who hold space for you, right? So who's a contrarian that's going to speak truth and challenge your thinking, right? It's very easy to get tunnel vision as a new entrepreneur. You're passionate, you think you know, but there's real wisdom in having people who are challenging your thinking and really getting you to ask hard questions, check your assumptions. So that's one. Who's the wise elder? And I say wise elder in quotes because it doesn't have to be someone who's older than you, but maybe someone who has a series of experiences or expertise that's different than yours that can pour into you. The third area to me is, who's a cheerleader? You need people who are in your back pocket, who are cheering you on every step of the way, especially because in the early days, entrepreneurship is incredibly lonely, and you need to know that there are people who get your vision and who are with you. Who's that ride or die supporter? For me, this is my husband. He is in it with me 100%. And then also people who don't look like you, who again can be challenging assumptions, making you think differently. The other thing I'll add here is that this group, this board of directors, evolves with you. So you can, by definition, always be growing it, bringing people in your life who are further along in the journey, who, are, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps ahead, who are, again, showing you the way, who are challenging your thinking, pushing you to think differently. So that to me is how I have really encouraged people to build support networks.
I love that. And I love how you gave a face or a character to each of the board of directors. Can't wait to read that book, Jess, if that's part of the book. All right. So we only have about 15 minutes left. I want to ask 2 last questions. So a real quick question is, and a couple of you spoke about this, are the naysayers. And I know with entrepreneurship, like, in fact, I was just having this conversation this morning that, you know, when you go off on your own and create a business and launch, even if it's a solopreneur or a huge company bringing on interns like Karin has, you have people around you who just don't get it. And it's usually, like Jess said, the people who are closest to you. So with that being said, maybe a personal way that you've either blocked out the naysayer and or a tip to all of these entrepreneurs who are listening to say, you know, I don't have the support of my people, the people who I love the most, or I feel alone in this. So what would be alone in because nobody understands what they're going through, or they're naysaying what they're going through. So what would be one tip or piece of advice, either that you've personally used or that you wish you would have used to get that out of your head? So I'm going to come back to you, Jess, because I see you shaking your head, and I do want to quickly go around Robin on this one as well.
Okay. Man, this is a tough one because, like I said, a lot of times those people that you want to be your biggest cheerleaders, they really don't. And I think that's not out of malice usually. I just want to say that. It's not usually out of malice. It's a couple of reasons. It's either they don't really get your vision, right? You are like 20 steps ahead, and you're a different person in your own mind than the person they know. And so sometimes it's just very hard to reconcile this direction you've gone. So, you know, for me, when I have had this, and I did, and it was very upsetting, I just go back to, why am I doing this? I just go back to that core belief. And I know we've talked about getting back to the belief piece. And I just have made decisions in my own life to say, okay, you know, this is a person I care about. I value their opinion, but I don't value their opinion in this area. They're not with me in it. And that's okay. You don't have to be. And I'm putting up a barrier in place of that. And, you know, that's easier said than done, especially if it's like your spouse or your partner, right? I mean, it's not as easy in that regard. But then I just think, all right, you know what? I'm just going to try to set a boundary here and have communication. To Karin's point, you know, sometimes you just need to say, you know what, this is something I'm very passionate about, and hold the boundary for yourself. I think that's, you know, as an entrepreneur, we have to start to put some boundaries in place. And if people are busting up against those, especially if it's people that you love, you have to be the one to hold the boundary. Just say, you know what, I appreciate your opinion, and this is the path I'm choosing. And, you know, that could lead to longer term implications. And that's just part of, you know, that's part of it. And those are things that you have to reconcile. But, you know, in some cases you can say, you know what, this isn't a person I want in my life anymore. That's a full out. Hopefully doesn't come to that. And sometimes it's just a not now. But for me, it really does come back to, you know, staying true to the belief and the vision that I have, and the passion that's in it, and then holding the boundaries so that, you know, I'm not allowing other people outside of my little personal board of directors, I'm not allowing those people to permeate that boundary when their opinion doesn't matter. And I remember something that Brene Brown said in one of her books, and she said, like, draw a little 1 by 1 box, and the number of people that you can write their names in there, that's how many people's opinion matters. And that has really served me well, because the people pleaser in me wants to, you know, care a lot about what people think. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, there's only a handful of people. So for me, it's really understanding who lives in that box and what is the boundary that I'm really willing to hold in place.
I love that. Boundaries are super important. And I often say, learn to love people from afar. You know what? I'm in Bangkok, way away from my close people. So you can move to people. Johan, one tip on how to overcome the naysayers in your life?
Get a yes sayer, period. No, because you have that, if you have naysayers, and especially if it is your spouse, it can be really difficult. And I don't know how to go into more what Jess said, because I totally agree. but really you need to put down you started off once and you have the reason why you do things, but then your support network of the cheerleaders of you need to listen to them and actually be clear about your boundaries.
Love that, Johan. Karin, naysayers.
Going to be really quick about this one. I'm going to say you need to trust your gut. If you believe this is the right thing, if you strongly believe it, you go for it. And if you have a doubt, then maybe you speak to someone you trust and you validate this. This would be the way I would handle it.
Love that. Love that. Sandy.
Yeah, I'll be quick as well, because I agree with everything. I definitely agree with setting the boundaries. I would say I equate the naysayers in my business to the toxic people that I experienced in corporate. And my solution for that in that situation was to remove them, if at all possible, because it's amazing how removing toxic people from your life has such an incredible momentum and impact on you. And I would say that their truth is not your truth, and don't let it hold you back, because I saw a great quote the other day that basically said, if you're not living your dream, then you're helping somebody else live theirs. And so whatever it is that they have to say is not your truth. So tune them out.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Last question, last piece of advice, and we'll have about 90 seconds each, so about half the time. So what would be the last piece of advice for those budding women entrepreneurs, or those women entrepreneurs who might even feel all alone? It could be either a lesson that you learned that we didn't discuss, or that last piece of advice that you would like to give them, those that are listening. And I'm going to go to Johan first. Johan?
With everything said, I would go in and actually what I usually do with a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders is really to go through the acronym WIN. What's important now? Every day, every week, reflect on what's important now and start doing it. That's Franklin Covey said, bring in the big stones first in a glass or in a container, the important stuff. Celebrate that.
Yep, that's two things. I think that is really important to make sure you're celebrating as well. Love that, Johan. Thank you so much. Sandy, how about you?
Yeah, I went to an all-girl Catholic high school, St. Francis of Assisi, and his prayer has stuck with me all these years, and it is in giving that we receive. I would say the number one strategy that I have in my business is altruism and giving with no expectation of anything in return. I know we're all in business to make money. I get that. But I will tell you that the more I let go of that money piece and really just look to be a servant, compassionate leader, the more that I receive tenfold in return.
Thank you, Sandy. Karin.
My piece of advice would be do what you love to do. Then you'll never feel like you're working hard, and you'll be happy, and happy people create good results. So that would be my piece of advice.
Love that. And Jess?
I would say nothing is permanent, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Mostly because, especially if you're thinking about going into entrepreneurship, I think there's fear that if you make the leap, there's all these questions about what if and failure. And to me, nothing is permanent. You can always course correct, you can learn and grow, and getting started doesn't have to be perfect. It's very much a trial and error kind of process. And just starting is what it boils down to.
Excellent. All right. Wow, I don't know about all of you, but there were a lot of great nuggets here that not only are applicable now, today, but also to build a better future for our women entrepreneur, even our men that are in the entrepreneurial space can take these nuggets. That's right, Johan. Take these nuggets and not only build themselves, but build the communities around them, if it be their spouse, their families, their networks, their employees, and so on and so forth. So hopefully you all got some nuggets. Please make sure that you connect with Johan, Sandy, Karin, and Jess via their social media handles. I know in the Whova app, they have put their connections and their links in there already. And if you're joining us from Facebook Live, please connect with them on their own personal pages and message them. If you have questions for them, that's why they showed up today. Let them help you, pick their brains. These are all for specialists in their field and believe in supporting the future of female entrepreneurship. I thank you for joining, and we look forward to see you on our next panel discussion tomorrow at the same time. And we'll be covering a completely different topic according to women leadership and empowerment. Thank you so much.